Once again, we're honored with an outstanding international speaker, this time from our northerly neighbor, Canada. Canada is our top trading nation and our long border country to the north. We have so much in common, yet are so different. Best, we're both amiable. Our room and tables are wonderfully decorated flags and other banners. And you'll notice on your tables, our ambassador is sweetening up to us with joint country images on a nice piece of chocolate to take home and enjoy. Michael Wilson, Canadian ambassador to the United States, joins us to let us know Canadian thoughts and current relations and challenging issues facing close friends in trade, the border, and the Arctic. Ambassador Wilson has a background with many years with private and public financial institutions. He's been involved with both asset management and the Royal Bank of Canada. He was elected to the House of Commons in 1979 and was appointed Minister of Finance in 1984. From those positions, he got involved with industry, science, technology, and international trade. Please welcome for me Michael Wilson, the Canadian ambassador to the United States.
Well, thank you very much, President John, for your very generous welcome and introduction, and everybody here for coming to this very large luncheon. It's terrific to see so many of you here and to have the opportunity to discuss some of the things that are important between our two countries. It's great to be reacquainted with the great traditions of Rotary here at Seattle 4. Have I got that? Showcase, synergy, and particularly service. And it's particularly gratifying to listen to the things that you do, to hear from people who have benefited from the work that you do. Rotary is a terrific organization. We had the opportunity to host your new international president, Wilf Wilkinson, at the embassy a couple of months ago at a Rotary International Board meeting. And we were very honored and very proud to have a Canadian in that very important position. Now, I'm delighted to be back here in the Emerald City. I was here some 15 years ago, and at that time I was up, how many floors was I up? 76 floors up while we conducted some trade negotiations, which led up to the NAFTA, and I could hear way down there on the streets in front of us, I'm not sure whether it's greeting or what, but it was great to feel the enthusiasm and energy of Seattle around the base of the building. I think the building's still standing, too. But it's terrific being here and getting a sense of the entrepreneurial vigor, the sense of community that you clearly have in this great city. You export a lot of this. We've had some exposure to Boeing and to Microsoft. 600 Starbucks are in Canada these days, so we are constantly reminded of the energy and the production, the productive capacity of this great city. Now, you have, as I don't have to say this to you, but you have also been very, very successful internationally as a community, both here in Seattle, but also your state. And I want to talk about some of these things during the course of my remarks this afternoon. First, I want to talk about the relationship between Canada and the United States, and particularly the position of that within the North American economy. Second, the prosperity of Washington State and how that has been earned through international trade with Canada. And thirdly, the challenges involved in maintaining border security without inhibiting the free flow of people, goods, and services. So let me start with our relationships with the United States and North American trade. It's well to remember that Canada is quite a successful country. We have today, we've enjoyed a number of years of good economic growth. Our inflation is, while creeping up a little bit, is still very much under control. We are the least indebted country of the G7 countries. I used to be an investment manager, as President John said, so I can say that our price-earnings ratios are above U.S. price-earnings ratios, and our long-term interest rates are below U.S. interest rates. Our corporate tax rates, for those of you who are considering investing in another country, are a good deal lower than yours now. So keep that in mind as you sit around the decision-making table. We are in our 10th straight year of a budgetary surplus, and most of our provinces are also in a budgetary surplus position. So things are in good shape in Canada. We are proud to see our Canadian dollar at the level that it is. At the same time, it does present challenges to us, particularly our exporting industries, but our companies have done well to adjust to the new competitive environment, and being right next door to the United States, a very powerful economy, is a great benefit for us in being able to adjust to that new reality. Moreover, Canada is a very safe country, and it's a good partner for the United States, and with the continuing cooperation that we have between our two countries, we intend to keep it that way. The links between Canada and the United States are deep, they're diverse, and they're complex. We have some 300 agreements between our two countries, and this is a very important element of cement to the mutual cooperation that goes on between us day in and day out, year in, year out. Both countries understand each other's policies on a multitude of issues. And while we don't always agree, we are each determined to maintain the vital partnerships that have served us so well. For example, Canada and the United States have a long history together in defending our continent and our values. Our defense industries have been integrated since the Second World War. And this year, for example, Boeing is delivering to Canada the first two C-17 large transport aircraft of the 4 that we've ordered, and that is a $1.8 billion order. For 50 years now, we've shared joint command of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, what we all know as NORAD. And since 2001, some 18,000 Canadian soldiers have served in Afghanistan shoulder to shoulder with those who have served from your country. Their mission there is twofold. First, to make sure that the country no longer provides a haven for terrorism, and to secure a peaceful environment where reconstruction and development can flourish safely. Today, we have some 2,500 members of the Canadian forces currently serving in Afghanistan as part of the UN-sanctioned and NATO-led International Security Assistance Force. Many Canadians have died there, but Afghanistan is Canada's largest recipient of foreign aid, so it is very important in our international awareness. But I think that the depth of our commitment to international security is clear. Outside North America, we work closely with the U.S. in several common causes. One other one is Haiti. It's the second largest recipient of Canadian aid. And working with the United States and Brazil, we have worked hard in a UN mandated force to restore normal life to that very troubled country. Both of our countries have recently taken steps to increase our presence in the Western Hemisphere. Like the United States, Canada has negotiated separate free trade agreements. Chile and Costa Rica are two of these, for example. But negotiations and discussions are proceeding with several other Central and South American countries. We're both members of something called the Global Partnership, and this is an organization which probably many in this room are not aware of, but it's a very important one. It's vitally important in the field of non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Canada has committed over $1 billion to securing or eliminating weapons or materials of mass destruction that were produced by the former Soviet Union. Another very significant area of cooperation is public safety. Mutual support in emergency management, border patrols, law enforcement, the intelligence communities, and many other behind-the-scenes activities to keep North America safe. We secure our borders best by seeking out problems before they hit the border. And we do this best by working collaboratively with our friends and partners in the United States. Now, in the 6 years since the terrorist attacks in New York and Washington, D.C., Canada has invested nearly $10 billion on security programs. And given the differences in the population sizes between our two countries, that would be the equivalent of about $100 billion being spent in the United States. Both Canada and the United States are also long-standing partners in stewardship of the environment. Migratory wildfowl, the porcupine caribou herd, water quality, boundary waters, air quality, and toxic substances. These and many more agreements focus on transborder issues that affect us all. Meanwhile, the Canadian federal government has introduced the toughest emissions targets in our history. Our emissions will be reduced in absolute terms in the coming years. At the UN Climate Change Conference that is underway now in Indonesia, in this case, Canada is very clear. All major emitting countries must take on verifiable, binding emission reduction targets. Now, in addition to this, Canada is a major partner in U.S. energy security. We have currently the second largest oil reserves in the world. Only Saudi Arabia is greater. The U.S. imports far more oil and energy products from Canada than from any other country. Canada supplies more crude oil to you than Saudi Arabia and Iraq combined. We are the largest supplier of natural gas to the United States, 85% of your imports. We provide about a third of the uranium you use. In other words, the safest and most abundant source of energy for the United States is just across the northern border in very friendly hands. Above all, Canada is the United States' most important partner in economic growth. There's no doubt that the North American Free Trade Agreement has been the key to growth. And I say that not because I signed that agreement on behalf of Canada in the previous life, but because objectively, and I'm going to give you some numbers here again, objectively, NAFTA has been a remarkable success. During NAFTA's first 13 years, trade among the three NAFTA partners almost tripled from about $300 billion to $900 billion. Investment flows have also increased considerably. Certainly, there have been hiccups along the way. Softwood lumber is a prime example. But Canada is committed to making sure that the rules-based softwood lumber agreement that we negotiated last year works. The agreement is the best alternative to another round of seemingly endless litigation. Like NAFTA itself, this agreement creates a stable, predictable framework for trade. Now we can direct our full attention to build a strong, more competitive North America. Now, two-way trade crosses the Canada-U.S. border at the rate of more than $1 million a minute, over $1.6 billion every day. Canada is the biggest export market for your American products. We buy four times as much from you as China does. Canada ranked number 1 in 38 of your states as the leading export market for goods in 2006. Trade with Canada supports over 7 million direct and indirect jobs across the country. That is 1 in 25 Americans depend for their job on open and free trade with Canada. More than 44,000 of those jobs are right here in King County. Look at it another way. The number of men and women in U.S. jobs supported by trade with Canada is more than the total workforces of, and I think you'll recognize these states, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and Washington combined. Moreover, as trade has expanded freely across the border, more and more industries, companies, and suppliers operate on both sides. Assembling the parts of a single car, for example, can involve 18 border crossings. I think you're all aware of the amount of trade that Boeing does through suppliers in other countries. Canada is one of the principal suppliers. The supply chains, the North American supply chains that are in 3 countries now are very important and developed directly out of the North American Free Trade Agreement. So producing each part in the most, or each product in the most efficient place can improve productivity, which leads to higher living standards. And what is developed in many sectors is an integrated North American economy using North American supply chains. Canadians, Americans, and Mexicans do not so much compete with each other as they combine forces as North American partners in production to compete with the world. And this is precisely what NAFTA has enabled us to do. And I suspect that it is the advantage that North American-wide supply chains will continue to provide us for many years to come. Now let me turn now to my second point, the prosperity that Washington State has earned through international trade with Canada. I scarcely need to tell this audience about the importance of trade to Washington State's economy. Last year, you exported over $53 billion in goods alone, and that's the equivalent of nearly 20% of your state's gross domestic product. And that doesn't include services, which make up a very large proportion of your economy. Canada is one of your 3 best international customers. Two-way trade between Washington State and Canada was worth more than $19 billion last year. And every hour around the clock, more than $2 million in trade crossed the border between Washington and British Columbia. Trade that creates jobs, tens of thousands of well-paying jobs. About 153,000 jobs in Washington State depend on the flow of goods and services across the Canadian border. Canadian investment in Washington accounts for a little over 18,000 jobs. Now, Boeing is a very, very big part of this. And Air Canada and WestJet, our 2 main airlines, each made major purchase commitments of 787s, 777s, 767s by Air Canada, and a significant order by WestJet for 737s. And this is on top of the military orders that I referred to a minute ago. But it's more than that. It's the tourism and regular visits with family and friends that are a major part of the relationship between the 2 countries. Over 3 million Washingtonians and Canadians cross back and forth this border every year. We've worked very hard to get or you've worked very hard to where you are today. Washingtonians' median income is now higher than that in 37 states, and Seattle is the most educated city in the United States and the most literate. And I had the good fortune this morning of spending about an hour and a half with representatives of 9 or 10 of your universities at the University of Washington, talking about how we can improve and develop the high level of relationships that we have between Canada and Washington State in a broad range of economic activities, ranging from student exchanges to collaborative research programs. Now, the already high degree of Canadian-American cooperation in the Northwest continues to increase. A clear sense that partnerships can get things done more efficiently than each province or state going it alone. Washington State and British Columbia have set the bar very high for regional cooperation. The joint meetings of the cabinets of Governor Gregoire and Premier Campbell are clear indicators of the extent of this cooperation. Washington is an active member of the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, or PNWAR, which is a partnership of 5 U.S. Pacific Northwest states, as well as British Columbia, Alberta, and Yukon. It's a highly successful U.S.-Canadian forum dedicated to encouraging global economic competitiveness and preserving our world-class natural environment. On the environment, the Governor of Washington, the Premier of BC, are members of the Western Climate Initiative. This is a group of 6 governors and 2 provincial premiers working on collective and cooperative ways to reducing greenhouse gases throughout the region. And these regional partnerships, I can say to you as the ambassador in Washington, do help us enormously in the national work that we do. On tourism, Washington State is well aware of the spillover effect of the 2010 Olympics. Coordinating tourist activities makes good business sense and will offer even richer experiences for visitors who travel to both countries. And I'm going to slip in a little commercial announcement here, President John, and extend a personal invitation to all of you to come and enjoy the fun of the games in 2010 in Vancouver and Whistler. You'll enjoy it. It'll be a wonderful, wonderful show. Now, Washington is about to implement enhanced driver's licenses. The first to do so in the United States, and BC is the first province in Canada to start testing its enhanced driver's license early next year. And they'll be facing full implementation about a year later. These measures will keep border crossings by BC and Washington residents secure, fast, and convenient. Business benefits as well from close intergovernmental relations. Startup arrangements, taxation issues, human resources can all be more straightforward if governments on each side of the border recognize that expanded business opportunities can help both of us. A recent study by the Border Policy Research Institute at the Western Washington University confirms this. They looked at 130 manufacturing, wholesaling, and warehousing companies that expanded across the border both ways. Canadian expansions into Whatcom County alone accounted for nearly 4,000 new jobs. And this business across the border is a two-way process. For example, on Monday in Vancouver, I had an opportunity to visit the new Microsoft Canada Development Center. This is going to employ initially about 200 people, but it will have room to grow to about 1,000 employees. So it's a great example of trade and services as ideas and software coding move back and forth across the border. Now, so far I've touched on international trade and Washington, BC cooperation. I want to mention now Canada's multi-billion-dollar Asia-Pacific Gateway and Corridor Initiative, much of which is centered in British Columbia. The gateway and corridor have become essential for North America's continued success in international commerce. With the September opening of the Prince Rupert Fairview Container Terminal, I've heard from a small number of U.S. business people who regard this project as a threat to the Seattle and Tacoma container ports. In my opinion, this misses the broader significance of the project. All West Coast terminals are pretty congested these days, and additional capacity inbound and outbound will be to everybody's benefit, including U.S. importers and exporters. The shorter Asia-Pacific route to Prince Rupert will save money as well as time for all North American importers and exporters, offering them a competitive edge. And business, as I've said earlier, is increasingly integrated throughout North America. The new transportation corridor serves all of North America efficiently, not just in Canada. And I said a few minutes ago, Canadians and Americans will be joining forces more and more as North Americans to compete against the world. I want to conclude on my third point, and that is maintaining a secure border without throttling two-way trade between Canada and the United States. This is essential to the prosperity of both of our countries. The Canada-U.S. border itself is huge, much longer than the distance from here to Paris. As I said earlier, the volume of trade that crosses our border is also huge. And more than 400,000 people a day on average across our joint border. It follows that a smart and efficient border is essential for our highly integrated industries. Over a third of Canada-U.S. trade occurs between branches of the same corporation, and a similar amount for trade within established supply chains. So it's the efficiency of these North American supply chains that allows our businesses and workers to compete efficiently against competitors in Asia and Europe. Conversely, inefficiencies in the supply chains translate into decreased competitiveness for North American companies. So a border problem is not a Canadian problem, it's not a U.S. problem, it's a Canada-U.S. problem. It's a North American problem. And we must make sure that the border provides gateways to prosperity, not cumbersome checkpoints, which will stifle our competitiveness. At the same time, both countries are rightly concerned about border security. That's not in dispute. Canadians once spoke of sharing the longest undefended border in the world. That now should be the longest secure border in the world. But problems persist on both sides. Some security measures don't seem to be based on risk management. Others are waiting for technology to catch up. The goals of still others appear to shift after they've been put in place. So I regret to say that the border is thickening. For example, a new border rule or regulation can appear quite sensible taken on its own. But taken together with other rules, the new rule might conflict with some. It might have unintended consequences and the costs of doing business. It might delay the just-in-time delivery of supplies for a factory on the other side of the border, causing a whole production line to slow down or even to shut down. As another example, most of us have probably heard of the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative. If not by that name, certainly the new U.S. travel document requirements for Canadians to enter or Americans to return to the United States. Yet there is some public confusion which can affect tourism. There's uncertainty about the acceptable alternative documents. I run into this all the time talking to people. The pressure of speedy implementation could well overwhelm our abilities to issue secure travel documents, and we saw that earlier this year with the passports. Please don't misunderstand me. Canada agrees with the security aim underlying documents to validate a person's nationality and identity. My concern is that we must do it in a way that prevents gridlock on the border. We need to remind ourselves constantly of the joint statement by President Bush and Prime Minister Harper this past August in Montebello, Quebec. Effective border strategies, and I'm quoting here, effective border strategies minimize security risks while facilitating the efficient and safe movement of goods, services, and people. Most significantly, they went on to say that these strategies will draw on risk-based border management, innovative use of new technologies, coordinated border infrastructure development, and by moving where possible, inspection and screening away from the border. Prime Minister and President understand that border security measures must not kill the goose that lays the golden egg. My job, and I hope yours as well, as business and opinion leaders in this great city, is to continue to persuade government officials of this reality. Officials on both sides of the border must keep these sound principles before them at all times. If they don't, the consequences and impact on our well-being could be very, very serious. Now, I began this afternoon by noting that Canada is a very successful country economically, and that Canada is a very safe country and good partners with the United States. The links between Canada and the United States are deep, very deep, and I've heard from some of you in this room today. Trade between us is vital for our continuing prosperity. Canada is your best customer by far. And I can say without hesitation that Canada's relationships with the United States are generally in very, very good shape. They're sound and they're businesslike. We make things together, we visit each other, and we're the best of friends, business partners, and allies. The Government of Canada has one first priority relationship, and that's with the United States. And I'm very proud to be able to speak here for Canada because I know that I'm among friends. Thank you very much, and enjoy your candy bar.
Thank you so much, Special Namer Ambassador Wilson. Next week at the Sheraton, the reception starts at 11. Lunch at 11:50. You don't want to miss getting the showcase Christmas in the Northwest entertainers. Remember, get your tickets as you're going out. It's great being a Rotarian with you. Thanks, and a happy holiday. We're adjourned.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.